now with bullying, kids have to deal with it at school, and then they have to deal with it also when they come home because it's on in their chat groups, it's on social media, it's essentially everywhere. What does it mean to raise children in two completely different eras? My mom raised me in a time when bullying happened on the playground, not in your pocket 24/7. When dinner table conversations were about homework, not misinformation spreading online. When the threats to our democracy felt distant, not immediate. Welcome to Prescribing a Healthier Future. I'm your host, Dr. Akilah Weber Pierson. Today's episode is deeply personal and deeply urgent. My guest is someone who has shaped not only my life, but the lives of countless families through her work in education and now as California's Chief Elections Officer. She's California's Secretary of State, a mother, a grandmother, and someone who understands that the health of our families and the health of our democracy are inseparable. She's also my mother, Dr. Shirley Weber. We're going to talk about what's different and what's the same about raising children now versus when I was growing up. And we're going to talk about our democracy, what it takes to protect it, and why California's election integrity matters, and what all of us can do in this moment. Mom, thank you so very much for being here.
Thanks for the invitation, I think.
I'll be gentle, but these conversations are those that we need to have. But before we begin, if you believe these stories matter, please take a moment to like, subscribe, or follow on whatever platform you're using. It helps us reach more families who need to hear that service, family, and purpose can exist together. So, Mom, first question. Have you liked, subscribed to my podcast?
Why would you ask me that?
Because I asked you before, so you should have a yes answer to that.
I subscribe to you, but you know what? My staff subscribes to everything. And so I have a staff who do nothing but social media, and they do it. I don't even know how to do social media that much. So the answer is, I don't know.
Okay, well, that would be the first thing we do this weekend is to go on your phone and have you
You're very welcome to
my
do that.
podcast.
And my grandkids do it better than I do. So that's that's wonderful. That gives me time with them. No
That
question.
is absolutely something. But seriously, Mom, thank you so much for being here today. I know you're very busy. You and I often have these kind of like offline conversations, and to be able to have you here and on the podcast is so important to me, but also important for everyone in California, to be quite honest, to hear about the state of our elections. But also, I think that your generation has some knowledge and some wisdom that we all need to hear, because these are very difficult times, but these are not unlike some times that you all had as children. And so really appreciate you coming here just to kind of drop some nuggets of wisdom. So, you have two children, two amazing children, one better than the other, your daughter. But I am currently raising, as you know, two sons in a world that just feels so very different than when you were raising me and my brother. So, I sit back and I worry about so much with Kadir and Jalil in this current environment. I worry about bullying. I worry about things on social media. I worry about whether or not they are getting an adequate education. I worry about whether or not they're well-rounded. I worry about so many different things. But I wonder, when you were raising Akilah and I, what were your biggest concerns at night? What would keep you up at night?
You know what? It's interesting because, when, I was raised in a very simple family with, as you probably know, there were 8 of us, 8 kids, 2 parents. And my dad was very committed to us, and my mother was too. So we had a very close family with regards to knowing what was happening. And I had older brothers and sisters to protect me from some of those things. But as I grew, the greatest concern I had was whether or not you and your brother would be well-rounded enough to function in a world that gave you resources and not forget from whence you've come. That was always a great concern of mine. And in fact, we lived in a community with individuals who had needs. You went to school with kids who were ordinary kids. I didn't want you to go, and we could have afforded to send you off somewhere out of the community. We could afford to live out of the community. But I took pride in the fact that I wanted you to have a responsibility to basically serve the community, because you were getting some resources, you were getting some knowledge that other people weren't getting. And I recognized that as a kid, that there were 8 brothers and sisters. I was the one who actually finished college, got the doctorate degree, did all the professional stuff, but I never wanted to forget my brothers and sisters. I never wanted to value them, and I never wanted to forget the community and the church that made me. And so I spent a lot of time worried about whether or not you guys were getting into the right environment, by putting you in the right school, that there were a balance enough with African-American kids. But not only just a balance of African-American kids, but kids who were struggling, kids who had needs. You and your brother went to high school right in the heart of the Black community. And you could see the achievement of some kids in that community because they had a family with more. But then you could also understand that there were kids looking at you as a role model, some of your friends. They began to change their behavior because they saw that you were doing things. And you still have some of those folks who are friends of yours now who didn't go all the way what you did in terms of college, but are still hardworking people in the community. So I worried about whether or not I was giving you the balance enough. I didn't want to make you, I always used to say, I don't want to make you guys kids that I hate. Mm-hmm. I used to always say, I want to like my kids. I don't want to have kids that are so affluent and so this and so that I don't even like them. Mm-hmm. And so that was a real concern of mine. And we structured our family, our home, the activities that you engaged in, and the school that you attended to make sure that you would be well-rounded, but also respective of that community and committed to changing that community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I know that was a huge push for both you and Dad. Many people were very surprised, or when they say, well, where did you go to high school, or where did you go to elementary school? I'm like, I went to Encanto. I went to Gompers, 7th through 12th, right there in the heart of Southeast San Diego, both of them. Where did you go to church? 38th Street Church of Christ, again, right in the heart of the inner city in San Diego. And yet I feel comfortable in multiple spaces around a variety of different people. We had that conversation when I was trying to choose a school here for Kadir, my oldest. Do I pick a school that really was more in the community, or do I pick a school that may not be, but maybe a little bit more challenging academically? And I know one of the benefits that you had is that you were a professor. So you had the opportunity to come into the classroom and sit in my classroom to make sure that the curriculum that we were getting was the same as those who went to schools north of 8. Not every parent like myself had that opportunity. So it's interesting because I do struggle with that. And you know that I have struggled with that with the boys, ensuring that they have a good academic foundation, but still are well-rounded and do not forget from whence all of us came. That is a challenge, but I think you did pretty good.
I hope so. We spent a lot of time thinking about it and worrying about it, but in the end, we discovered also that in those communities where you went to school had some very rich experiences that other communities did not have. And it was interesting because oftentimes I remember when you went to Boston for a summer camp, and all of the affluent friends that we had wanted to know, how in the world did you get that? And what I had to explain to them was that when people outside the California are looking to help kids who are Black, they go into those inner city schools. And in that inner city school was you and a host of your friends whose parents might have been teachers or whatever they were, but they were picked to go to these very unique experiences that were fully paid for because they were sitting in an inner city school. And so some of those parents didn't realize that by being out of that community, you also left a lot of the richness that was in that community that they just assumed that those parents had already. And it worked out well for you. You got lots of summer activities. You got all kinds of grants and things that happened every summer that came out of Gompers. It was amazing experience, and and that's why there's a richness there that's oftentimes is overlooked. But it worked well for you and your brother. It really did.
Yeah. I want to transition into some of the concerns that we parents have today with raising our children. So, social media and technology. When I was growing up, well, what we were exposed to was very protected, I should say. You and Dad did not allow Akilah and I to watch TV. We couldn't just come home and just like turn on TV. We could watch Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, Square One. Those were all PBS shows. And then later on, Cosby and Different World. But now, and then we had pagers, which you didn't want me to get a pager. I snuck and got one. But now it's everywhere. You cannot escape what's on social media. You cannot escape technology. Have you ever heard of companion chatbots?
No, I don't have kids. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I don't have that. I've heard of it, but I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is this movement, this very rapid sense in technology where it's really hard for even us who are parents to keep up to know exactly what our kids are being exposed to. So smartphones, social media, chatbots. What are some of the tools that you used when you were raising your children that we as parents could potentially use today to try to mitigate some of the harm and some of the unseen?
There's always harm out there, even when we didn't have that level of technology that you guys have today. We still had technology. We still had things that were taking place. We still saw things that we didn't think about, that didn't want our kids to think about. The focus on clothing and, kids being shot because they had the right certain tennis shoes on. I mean, those things creeped in real quick. And you didn't have to have a whole lot of social media. You just had to have a few kids who really wanted that. And so that becomes a major issue. And I think because we have so much technology now in terms of what kids can do, one of the things that we don't do is consciously engage in conversation with our kids, make sure that we have dinner every night or most nights in the evening. I generally cook dinner every night for you guys, and your dad would always be kind of late getting there, but he would get there because it was important to say, like you said, what are you guys doing today? What was homework like? What was class like? What happened at school? Popping in at the school just to see what's happening, making sure you're part of the schedule of what the school is doing is extremely important. And folks need to do that. I have friends who even will put a basket on their table and say, okay, everybody put your cell phone in. We have dinner every night. We talk about stuff. We figure out what's going on. One of the most interesting things that happened this past year that I always like to spend time with the grandkids. And even when they come over, sometime I make them put stuff away and we'll play a game or something like that because I'm a real big person on games. But when we were away on a cruise, there was I could have actually paid into getting the Wi-Fi and all that stuff, and my staff was freaking out because they couldn't find me where I was and on this cruise ship. But it was interesting because we didn't have that, and I did make it available to the boys, and they hung out in my room all the time. I heard the most amazing stories from Kadir and Jaleel that you could imagine. And they talked for hours about stuff. And I would say, that is not true. Grandma, it really, really is. They would create these stories of these people. And it would be interesting that we did that for over a week, and I saw a side of them that I hadn't seen before. And I think sometimes because we're so busy and we're moving and grooving so much and have so much going on, we haven't carved out this significant amount of time. And fortunately, the cruise ship carved it out for us because they made us pay extra for Wi-Fi, and I wasn't about to pay all that money for it. So I just decided we just do our thing for a whole week. And I think that's important. Parents have to, because it's just not automatic. You have to begin to structure anything you want. And I mean, I do that with my friends when they play chicken foot at the house. I have to structure my social life with my friends. Otherwise, I get so caught up in Sacramento, so caught up in the work I got to do, so caught up in people who talk the same language that I talk, which is, political stuff, that I leave behind these people that are really, really my heart and my soul and my friends. And I think the same thing happens with us. Sometimes when the boys come over, I make them put stuff away, and we will play. Generally, we play dominoes or some game that they love games, and so I like games, and so sometimes when I make them put it away because I just don't want to see all these phones, they really enjoy it. They're highly competitive. We can sit around the table and play those games and laugh and talk, and I think we have to make this a conscious effort. Otherwise, our kids will somebody else will own our kids. And they're doing it right now. And it's easy to give your kid a phone. I see people give little kids phones and they're working on them already. Their fingers are moving and thumbs and what have you. And I'm thinking, okay, you just gave that one away. So now what happens for the next kid? You're going to do the same thing. And it's easy. It's easy. It's comfortable to just give them their phone and go upstairs and chill out, But I think there has to be a conscious effort to really make sure that whatever you do, vacations and what have you, that there's a significant amount of time that's carved out for you and your kids. That's conversation time, that's dinner time. And when more parents do that, they will see a different side of their kids that are coming around. It's really important.
Yeah, actually, I think that's really good advice. I think because even as parents, there's so much going on all the time because of the advancement of technology. There's always an email, a text message, or something that people are able to have access to you that we don't realize that we need to put our phone down and essentially carve out that time. There's so much talk about the fact that we are losing the ability to have relationships and connect with other people like we used to in the past. And I think doing something as simple as ensuring that you've got time, that you're scheduling it. One of the things that I noticed because of COVID, when we're talking about, maintaining healthy families, healthy family relationships, was when you started the Zooms for the family over COVID. And, all of your siblings live in LA. Pretty much all of my cousins on your side live in LA. And during COVID, they were even more isolated because nobody was interacting with each other. And yet you started the family Zooms on Sunday, and it was initially pretty much your generation, my generation, and even some of the generation after me. And we would get on, we'd learn about our family, we would talk about what was going on, and we're now in 2025, and you and your siblings are still do it every Sunday.
Every Sunday, 4:00. And it's, and we sometimes go a little over, but it's just good to check in. And as we get older, we feel it's even more important for us to check in with my sisters and others because it's just, and you guys know if you want to catch us, that's always the funny part because we're talking about all kinds of things at 4:00. If you want to get to that generation and talk to them about Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever you guys going to have going on or some vacation, you guys break into our Zoom at 4:00 and come and tell us and to ask questions because it's like a standard for us to do this at 4. And I personally really look forward to it. And we've been doing it now for what, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah. Since 2020.
It's been amazing that we continue to call each other. And my sisters have learned how to use Zoom, how to use technology. But it's an easy way for us to get together and to do that in a way that that gives us some stability every Sunday. And I look forward to it, and I think they do too.
Yeah, you're right. It is a great way to crash in because when Jalil had to do his family tree, I said, well, this will be easy. You can get the first generation, get a couple of my cousins, and so you get second generation, just jump on the Zoom and ask everybody the questions. So want to move onto a topic that you dealt with me and multiple parents are dealing with at this point, and that's bullying. So, since you're my mom, that I was bullied as I was younger. Like, we were joking the other day when I said, like, from kindergarten to 12th grade. It wasn't that long.
No.
It was not that long. But I would probably say a lot of elementary, definitely middle school. I was bullied for a variety of different reasons. Bullying at that point was very different. I would go to school, I would have to deal with it. I could come home, complain, cry to you, but I wouldn't have to deal with it at home. Now, with bullying, kids have to deal with it at school, and then they have to deal with it also when they come home because it's on in their chat groups, it's on social media, it's essentially everywhere. How would you advise parents dealing with that today?
Well, as you pointed out, this world has changed so much. I mean, when you were a kid being bullied, some guy liked you, and as a result of that, he would say little crazy things to you at the day, and you'd come home crying because he said you weren't cute, and you actually were. So, I mean, it was easy to deal with that, to a certain extent. But at the same time, we're dealing with a new world where bullying has gone to a very dangerous state. That wasn't a dangerous state. That was just some kid, trying to get your attention. But now it's dangerous because people play on the mental state of other kids and make them feel like they're not worthy, in a weird sense, and actually recommend things that are very dangerous. I think every parent, when kids, this happens to them, the parents need to actually seriously intervene. Go to the school, make sure they understand it, but also make sure that the parent of the kid who's doing the bullying understands it, because there's some issues with that child as well. And if they're recommending that kids hurt themselves or, do some dangerous things to themselves, something is also wrong with that kid who thinks that's okay. And there needs to be some intervention. And we see this a lot with when things happen at schools, and all of a sudden everybody's just finally saying, oh, well, he bullies everybody. He's made these statements, or somebody's made these statements to him, and he's decided to take it on his own. It is really, really important to intervene at that level with the other kid and the school itself to make sure that they understand what's going on. But equally important, at least I felt with you and with my son, was that I needed to fortify you guys to actually learn and love yourself, to make sure that people couldn't tell you things that were horrible and you not know that they weren't true. That despite whatever happened in that little environment, you're still a handsome young man. I still love you. Your cousins love you, your relatives. You're still the center of our attention, and you're not isolated. And that became important to say, this guy talks about your arms or whatever he's talking about, but you're really a pretty little girl. Look at yourself. We still value you. Everybody values you. You're smart. You're this, you're that. Reinforce that to your kids so that there's no one, even after you get beyond this person at this school, that there's nobody outside of you, no bully, no boyfriend who's dangerous is going to come in and take advantage of you mentally and emotionally because you don't have a sense of self. So you have to really begin to help kids understand that they are important, they're beautiful, that whatever they bring to the table is amazing, and that the family cares about them, and that not only just the mother and the father, but the family does, and the community. You guys were surrounded by friends, and maybe because I was at the university, but you were surrounded by a lot of older students who thought the world of you guys because your mother was their professor and they would come to our house and those kinds of things. So you had like a real strong base of support of older students who could help you, as well as parents and others that were there with you. So I think it's really, really important that we reinforce our kids with all that we can about how wonderful they are and how amazing they are in terms of what they're doing.
Yeah. I think that is such amazing advice. And we don't do it enough. I know because of the image that this country will often give to Black people, and specifically Black men and Black boys. I remember when I found out that I was having a boy, I was very conscious about the way in which I was going to talk to my future son and how I was going to talk to them when they were born. So from the beginning, yes, handsome. And you hear me call him handsome all the time. Handsome is not just how you look, but also how you treat other people, the level of intellect, how you carry yourself. So I have purposely ingrained positive, affirmative thoughts and beliefs in them so that, yes, they do have that fortitude, that fortress to know that you may say one thing because you may be jealous or envious, but I know the truth. and bringing in community is extremely important to that. And I think you also instilled a little bit of fear in at least me, because you used to tell me that I could either deal with the bully or I'd have to deal with you. So I didn't want to have to deal with you. So I knew I had to deal with the bully. But, really appreciate that. I'm going to jump because you talked a lot about the importance of community. And in a time where, there is a question about community, there is a question about relationships. There was a time probably long ago where people would drive into their driveway and speak to their neighbors. Now we just drive in, our garage door goes up, closed down. You don't even necessarily speak and talk to them. When you moved to San Diego, all of your family was in Los Angeles, and then Dad eventually moved down, and you guys got married and you started a family here. But all of your family was in Los Angeles. All of my dad's family was in Louisiana, pretty much. And so you had no family here. You had no friends here that you'd had for a long time. You had no foundation here. And yet you created that community that Akilah and I were raised in. We had our extended aunties and uncles and our cousins that were here. How did you do that? And how should people be able to create that today? Because that was so very important. That was really how you were able to raise us. People say it takes a village to raise a child. We had a village that helped raise us because we had working parents. So what advice would you give to parents and families today?
Well, the first thing my mother told me when I was moving to San Diego, and of course, all of us lived in LA. So for me, moving 125 miles was like the world had crashed for my mother because she was surely a hovering mother. But she said, make sure you go to church. When you go down to San Diego, go to church, become a member of a church. And I remembered this church that had a fire once when I was a kid, and I could vaguely remember what took place, and they had like 8 kids and all this kind of stuff, but it was like far distance in my memory. But I found that church, and I moved to San Diego, and the first Sunday that I was here, I went to church. And I introduced myself, and they all knew that I'd come down to San Diego, and one or two actually knew my grandfather, who was very active in the Santa Monica Church of Christ. And so I introduced myself. And the beauty of it, the minister's wife walked up to me and said, she was glad to see me, and they knew I was coming to teach. I mentioned what I did. And she said, what are you doing today? And I said, I'm just going to go home because there was nothing to do. I was the only one in San Diego. She goes, well, would you like to come to dinner with us? And I said, yeah, when? She said, right now. She was a person who cooked dinner every Sunday in case somebody came to visit from the church. That was Sister Kirkendall.
Okay.
And so she had 8 kids. And so she told Roy, she said, Roy, put Sister Weber, let Sister Weber follow you to the house. They lived up in Emerald Hills. And so I followed her home with her kids. She made wonderful homemade bread, all this kind of stuff she'd already made. I said, you cooked all this stuff? She said, I always cook for anybody because somebody may be dropping by. And so she introduced me to the members there, and Eva was there, and Daisy came in, and all these different women. And then they discovered that I had done things in LA, and they worked with me together. They taught me how to quilt on Tuesday night. I mean, I go quilting with these older women. So I hooked up to a whole group of women that initially my husband didn't understand. He was like, well, what you doing with all these old people? Well, these old people turned out to be the foundation of me in San Diego. And some of them, two or three are still alive. But it was interesting. It's been 50 years. And those women, when I eventually got married and when I had got ready to have kids, they did baby showers for me. They did this, they did that. So they really brought me into the San Diego larger community. And then the university did. I was fortunate to be in a Black Studies, coming to establish Black Studies, because that immediately meant you were coming to deal with the Black community. And I worked with Chicano studies, and so I worked with the Latino community, and it went on and on and on. And so those folks became kind of a part of what we were doing because it was very, very community-based. And as a result, some of my students are still moving and grooving in San Diego. I see them in various places, but they then also took care of you guys. When I had you and some of the others, you still interact with a lot of those who were your babysitters. These students needed extra money, and they would pick you up from school and bring you to the house. And once or twice, when I had to go out of the state, and your daddy was in another place, Desiree would spend the night. She'd pick you up and stay at the house, and she'd take care of you and Akilah. And when you were like 10, 11 years old, so we consciously formed a community. Even when I put you in Encanto Elementary, the few families that I got a chance to meet who actually lived in that community, the Browns and some others, I immediately began to interact with them. So that I took the initiative, and I tell people, take the initiative. When we were getting ready to put you in piano or tennis, at one of those, I can't remember, Deborah was not able to get off from school at the time because she was teaching. And I said, okay, I'll take them to piano. I told her, I said, don't you want your son to take piano lessons? And she goes, yeah, but I don't, my husband's working and I'm working. We don't have that time frame. And I said, okay, I'll take him to piano and you bring him home. Because by then she'd be off. So we worked out this relationship with tennis and piano and all these things. And so these families then began to support each other. But I kind of initiated it. They were kind of hesitant. I said, oh, no, I'll take your kids and I'll do this and I'll do that. And you guys became almost like, and still are, like sisters and brothers in terms of your relationship, your children, your families that you formed as a result of it. But I tell people, take the initiative. Don't just stand off. You need a village. I needed somebody to help me raise my kids. I needed to be able to call somebody when a kid would be sick with asthma or something happened. Eva would take you. And she said, don't worry about her. I'm going to take her to school. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And for 2 or 3 days, she would do all of that while I was in the hospital. Your dad and I were in the hospital with Akilah. And that would have happened if I had been in L.A., but I wasn't in L.A., So as a result, these people became my family. And it didn't matter what it was. They would pick you guys up. They'd take you places to Little League games or whatever it was. And I tell people, initiate it. Do some things yourself and bring those people in because you need a village. And your children need adults that they can talk to, or older teens, as you did with Eva's daughter, Danielle, and some others. That became like your big sister. So you could tell her things that you wouldn't probably tell me, or you guys could sing songs in the bathroom and drive all the neighbors crazy as you did. But it was a way in which you could have an additional support system. You need people to help you raise your kids. Don't believe you can do it by yourself. You can try, but it'll drive you crazy. You need families. You need other kids. You need older children that are in other families. You need a village. And sometimes it's not immediately there in your neighborhood, but it is in that city, and you find it.
Yeah, no, that is true. And as you were talking, I was thinking about it, and not necessarily just if you have a family, because, after I left college, I went to med school, and then I went to residency, and then I went to fellowship, and then I went and I was working in Texas. And in all of those places, I didn't have a family yet, but I still needed a village. I still needed that connection to the greater community, people that were outside of just my school environment or my training environment. And so for me, it was always Deltas, find the closest Delta chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And that was the opening to my village. So met them and their families and got involved in the various communities. And that really helped me live comfortably in all of those different places, so far away from my family. And lots was going on with my family throughout that time. But they really became my foundation in those things. So you're right, being very intentional, going out, seeking those kind of relationships in groups that you are affiliated with or have some kind of affinity to is extremely important. So want to go into education a little bit. So you are an educator at heart. You were a professor at San Diego State for 40 plus years, one of the founding members of the Africana Studies Department or Black Studies Department there. You also started your political career in education. You were on the school board, San Diego Unified School Board. I don't remember. It must have been like the late 80s.
88 to 96.
88 to 96. So right in my middle school, 96 when I graduated from high school, you were on the San Diego Unified School Board. And you, as an assembly member, did a lot in the space of education. So you are an educator at heart. A lot of what you have done, and I even remember as a kid from having to go to school board meetings or listening to your speeches in various places, you talked a lot about closing the academic achievement gap because there was a significant gap between the academic achievement scores of Black students, sometimes brown students, and other students. Here we are, 30, 40 years later, still have that significant achievement gap for our Black students. Why?
Because, it's painful to even think about to a certain extent, because when I was on the school board, I made that a top priority. And we changed a lot of things. I mean, we improved the achievement. When I got on, there was like 20 or 30 Black boys that actually had a B or better average in this 130, 40,000 students. In a matter of a couple of years, we had like hundreds of young Black boys who actually were doing well. And they had this, they had a sense of self and ownership. And we developed these programs at these 4 schools and all those kinds of things. When you start changing systems, it's like the university in the 40 years I spent there. It takes a long time to do it. It takes persistence, even once it's done, because the institution doesn't give itself up that easily. And so what happened was it started taking the programs that we put together, we had a program for Latino females and all these other kinds of groups that we thought were falling behind. And they started, we can take that and put it over here. And we can take that and put it over there. And they did. And what happened was they lost the essence of the programs. And so as a result, what made the programs unique and the efforts unique was that it addressed the cultural needs of this particular group. And now you've taken it and you spread it among all kinds of folks who don't have the same cultural reality. And as a result, you lose it. You lose a lot of it. And you don't have, we didn't have and still don't have a what I consider a serious push in the larger sense of the community around education. It has to be a constant push, a constant effort. It has to have school board members that are relentless in their efforts. And that was me. I mean, I remember when I first was president of school board, I gave out awards. And when I gave out athletic awards, there was all kinds of kids in there. When I gave out academic awards, there were very few Black kids in the room, very few Latinos. And I said, wait a minute. And I remember going to a conference that we had for those kids. I said, you know what? I give out all these awards. I'm an African-American woman. I'm embarrassed that none of you people are there. And I told them, I said, I want some valedictorians. I don't know if you guys remember that. I said, I need some Black and brown valedictorians in San Diego. And the kids was like, oh, that means you have to be perfect. You have to be. I said, I don't care what it takes. It's 9th grade. Let's start now. I want some Black valedictorians. And in 4 years, we must have had 6 or 7 Black valedictorians. I think it was a class that you graduated in. Because we kept pushing this issue of excellence, and helping kids figure out how they can change their GPAs and how they could do things to get better grades. And so we had African Americans, we had Latinos, we had kids who looked like the district itself with the diversity there who were valedictorians. But you have to have someone who creates a vision for them. Even in going to the legislature, there was the same kind of thing that we had to do. We had to constantly work on those issues. So it is disruptive and very disturbing that we're still in this space. And unfortunately, what I don't see is an effort on the large part of the larger community to do it. When I went into the legislature, I did that. We got the money. We did this. We did those things. I'm no longer there. You're doing some of it now. But it's not an agenda item for the entire state. And I went to a retreat and they were trying to recruit me to run for governor because they said what they need is a governor who has an education focus. And I met with some governors when I was on a national board who were actually educators, who wanted to change their state. And they were in the South. And they created situations where every kid in the school, in their state, got preschool. And was of quality and so forth and so on. So we have to have legislators who see education as a primary focus, rather than some of the other stuff. The other stuff is important, but we just completely left that behind. We figured those parents who can get it, go somewhere else and get it, or outside their community, or they're smart enough to figure it out. but have not realized that we live in a state with the richest educational programs in the world. Mm-hmm. Our community colleges, our Cal State systems, our UC, they rival everybody in the world. Everybody talks about the greatness of our higher ed, and yet K-12 should be the entree into that, and it's not. Mm-hmm. And so not all K-12. And so as a result, it is unfortunate that we have not made K-12 as important as the University of California, mm-hmm. as in terms of what we see. And it is disturbing to me to have spent so many years working on this and still fighting the battle. I still fight the battle. I still go to a lot of the committee hearings. I still participate in some other community groups that are external to the to the legislature, that work with charter schools and others. But, charter schools are not the answer. Mm-hmm. They're once again an exceptional thing on the side. Every kid in California deserves an excellent education. Mm-hmm. And that is what we have failed to do and continue to fail to do. And no matter what superintendent comes in, they take some of it, but then they get caught up in the various organizations and the groups and what have you. And those things and their issues become more important than basically saying every kid in this state must have a quality education that meets all the standards that are there, whether they want to go to university or not. But they should be able to say that we do this for every kid in California. And we haven't said that. And when you don't say it, it's because you don't believe it. And it won't happen.
Yeah. We've talked about the academic achievement gap. We talked about schooling, my decision of where I was going to send the boys and the various rationale, but really wanting to ensure that they had a very solid academic foundation from preschool. One of the first things that I tackled in the legislature, even though I'm a doctor, you would think it would be something in health, really was around education with AB 2774, trying to continue to close that academic achievement gap. That bill, unfortunately, was not able to get all the way to the governor's desk, but we did get the equity multiplier out of it, which was some more funding to try to focus on that. The test scores are just coming out about that. We just passed a bill this year. It was a huge effort to really work on how we teach reading in schools, because reading truly is fundamental. It is the basis upon which everything else is built. So we are trying to do some things at the state level, may not be as fast or as quick as some people would like. But I guess then my question would be to you as a parent. What advice would you give to parents? Because you were a very fierce advocate. Like I said, you were there. This was before you were on the school board. You were there in the schools. You were aware of what we were learning. You were aware of what other schools or other districts were teaching, the resources that other schools had in different parts of San Diego. And you advocated for those at our school in inner city and in Canto, in inner city San Diego. And so what advice would you give to parents today? Because oftentimes significant change happens from ground up, right, and not necessarily looking at the state or the government to actually change its ways. Sometimes they have to be forced to be changed by people.
You're correct. The work that even I did at the school board actually began before I was on the school board. I was at the school at Encanto. I was organizing parents because they were getting ready to restructure our school in this very destructive way. And we fought back, and I wrote all kinds of documents and went to the school board and got them to change it. And it was because there were some parents at the school that made it happen. But you know what I believed, and I still do to this day, that the work that we did in Encanto to change Encanto, and Encanto was a great school, magnet school, but it was a great school for kids, all kids, was because those parents who know more are present in that school. And that was a commitment I made. I made that commitment to living in the community. I said, if I live in this community, it cannot just fail. It cannot just go down. Why? Because Daniel and I are not going to let it happen. But if all of us move way to far out in La Jolla, wherever, Rancho Santa Fe, wherever they are, it will help, but it will not have the commitment because it's not there. And I felt that way about school. I had studied this stuff when I was at UCLA, and I felt that way about schools. And Malcolm X said it, you run down the community because you run it down yourself. You don't live there. You don't take care of it. And so as a result, it consciously put you guys in an inner city school, because I knew that if I was in that school would be better. And I actually went and recruited parents to come to that school and bring their kids. And so we formed this group, and there were, whether it's the Browns or whether it's the other families that we knew, we formed an organization with the parents in Encanto. And they were grateful, because here I became chair of the little advisory board at Encanto. I actually rearranged my schedule at the university so I could be chair of the board, because the board met at 1:00 on Thursdays. And the average parent in that community could not attend. So only the kids bussed in. Parents were on the committee. And I said, okay, that happened the first semester. Ain't gonna happen the second, because I'm in control of the schedule at San Diego State. So I rearranged my schedule so I could make those meetings. And then I changed the meetings to in the evening, where the parents could come, and had spaghetti dinner so the parents could come who worked. Okay. So here I was, even though I could be there in the day, I wanted those other parents there who had similar concerns, and created this idea that they could come and be a part of this school. So all of the parents start working. So when they decided they were going to change our school and restructure it, we had the parents to say no. The principal had called me and told me everything they were going to do to the school. And so she said, but it's in you guys' hands, not mine. And we basically blocked the district from multi-tracking our school. And when I got on the school board, I took it out of every school, because it was a destructive structure that was not beneficial to kids. And so it was interesting that happened because I was in that school. And I brought these other educators and parents who lived in that community who could have bused their kids somewhere else. I brought them in, and we decided to start demanding things for all of the children in that school. And I say that to people all the time. I look at my friends, and you in the pot now. Where are our kids? Where are our parents who basically can transform the school? It takes a lot of time. I understand that. And because I was a university professor, I had some time to do this. I wasn't a 9 to 5 kind of person. But at the same time, if our community gets better, it is because we make it better. It's because we decide that this is a community where the majority of our kids live, and that they should have the same benefits as everybody else. And eventually in time, everybody will end up with something. But it really requires a sacrifice on the part of folks to be able to do that, and to do it and do it well. And we had a lot of kids who lived in our community, and their friends didn't believe that a doctor who was a PhD and a lawyer or a judge lived in their neighborhood. And I remember one day, this little boy who delivered our paper knocked on my door. I answered the door, and he goes, "Hi, Miss Weber." I said, "Hi." He said, he had a couple of friends who says, "Aren't you a doctor, and isn't your husband a lawyer?" I said, "Yeah." And he turned to his friend and said, "I told you so." And they walked off. And he was this kid delivering our paper. He eventually came to San Diego State. It was really quite interesting, but he was delivered our paper, but he was just impressed. And I think because when he came whenever he picked up his money that we owed him, I would write him, he always wanted checks. We write him a check, because he kept his little account. And it either had my PhD on it or your dad's lawyer, whatever it was. And it was really kind of interesting because he knocked on the door and said that. And then he said to his friends, "I told you so," and walked away. And I thought, what the heck was that? And then it dawned on me. That's what he was doing, because he had told somebody else that. And when they were out playing or something, and I didn't pay much attention, but he was very, very business oriented little brother who delivered his papers initially on a regular bike. And then as he got to be a teenager, he had a little motorbike kind of thing he put together. But he was our paper kid for all the years that we were taking the papers in that house. But it was interesting because that motivated him, because Leon Wesson had told me that he was up at his school, at the middle school, and that he was bragging to the folks about who lives in his neighborhood. And we were one of those people who lived in his neighborhood, that there were good people, and there was doctors and lawyers living in his neighborhood. Now, it might have been one, but nonetheless, they were in his neighborhood. And I always remember that because you wonder if when you move in your neighborhood, if it matters. And then you run across a kid where it really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.